Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Candidate Forum for Assembly District 27. This forum is hosted by 4 local not-for-profit organizations, each of them dedicated to educating our public with unbiased, nonpartisan information. My name is Joe Kita, and I am the executive editor of the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, which publishes the Merced Focus. We're so excited to have all of you here.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Joe Moore. I am the president and general manager of KVPR, Valley Public Radio, Central California's NPR station. We're happy to have CMAC taping and streaming this forum tonight. There will be a link to rewatch the recording on CMAC's website.
Hi, and I'm Sue Goldman with the League of Women Voters of Fresno. Here to moderate tonight's forum is Blake Zante, Executive Director of the Maddie Institute, partnered with Valley's 4 public universities at Fresno State, where he oversees the Institute's operations with the aim of training the next generation of leaders and increasing civic engagement.
Thank you all. Now I'd like to introduce the candidates for California State Assembly District 27. We're joined by Assemblymember Esmeralda Soria, the Democrat candidate for Assembly. Assemblymember Soria grew up in Lindsay. She served as the Fresno City Council member for District 1 prior to her election to the California State Assembly in 2022. We're also joined by Joanna Garcia Rose, the Republican candidate for Assembly. Ms. Rose has lived in the Central Valley since the age of 19. She is an auditor and currently serves as a business manager for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Our journalists this evening are Pablo Orihuela and Daniel Bergstrom with Fresno Land, Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado with Valley Public Radio, and Brianna Vicari with the Merced Focus. I'll turn it over to you, Brianna, and we'll start with some questions on housing affordability and homelessness.
Assemblywoman Soria, we'll start with you. In the last 5 years, rents and home prices in the Central Valley have skyrocketed, not just in Fresno or Merced, but also in rural communities where overcrowding has become common. Many state bills around housing tend to focus on coastal issues, NIMBYism, zoning, that are less prevalent in the Valley. What have you done and what will you continue to do to make housing more affordable in your district? What can be done to make sure smaller communities have more access to the complexity of state funding to build more housing?
Thank you, Brianna, for that question. What I am striving to do in Sacramento is to bring a rural lens. As someone that grew up in the city of Lindsay in a small rural community, I know very intimately the challenges of families across these small rural communities like in Livingston, Mendota, and the challenges that exist with housing. My #1 goal has been to support policies to streamline any environmental regulations that we have seen historically has hampered the ability to build more. And I've also supported investments for affordable student housing. More recently, in my first 2 years, I was able to bring $100 million to work with Merced College and UC Merced for students that live in our communities across these rural communities so that they have an affordable place to live and not have to worry about housing costs, which we know cripple our current students as they're pursuing their public education. And so my goal is to continue to bring additional resources, not just to build more affordable housing and also market rate housing, because I'm a strong supporter of first-time home ownership, and that's why I was proud to support the Cal Dream Home program, where more of our families need to own their own homes. And so I will continue to advocate those issues, and in this next legislative session, focus on bringing more opportunities for rural communities, in particular, challenges with water. We know in the community of the city of Livingston, out in also Mendota, San Joaquin, they have water challenges and limitations. And so we're hoping to make sure that we're addressing those challenges and at the same time bringing additional resources like I've done previously as an assembly member and also as a council member here previously in the city of Fresno.
And Ms. Rose, what are your specific policy solutions to making housing more affordable in the district? You've previously pointed to a difficulty in obtaining permits. What's broken in the system from your perspective, and how would you fix it?
I think that there's a lot of issues in the state of California. If you look at the control that's been going on in the state of California, we've had single party control, and yet we still have affordable housing issues. So we really need to address the biggest issue, I think, is the red tape, the bureaucratic red tape that prevents us from having housing being built. I also think there's an issue with affordability because we're seeing massive inflation, especially in the last few years. So how can you build something affordable when you can't even go to McDonald's for under $30 these days? We really need to focus on getting businesses to be prosperous. We need to focus on having energy be affordable. No business, no builder is going to come to California when we have energy prices soaring and we have water is very expensive and very limited. So we really need to focus on things that are going to not just be a Band-Aid. We need to have permanent long-term fix as far as water and infrastructure so that we can have that prosperity come back into the state of California. Specifically, if you look at some of the stuff that has been trying to be passed, it's all just lip service. There's no funding attached to it. Currently, we're in a $70 billion deficit right now. So it's great if you want to bring legislation that's going to give people opportunities to buy first-time homes. I'm an advocate for that. But where does that money come from? There's no funding source for it. So, we're just continuing to create another problem and telling people, oh, yeah, we're going to handle this by pulling money from nowhere and giving it to certain people to be able to buy a first-time home. So I think we just really need to focus on getting balance back in California to make legislation be streamlined where we can have builders want to build in the state. We're the least friendly business state in the union. We need to change that.
This next question will be on homelessness accountability. Candidates, as California's homelessness community grows across the state and the amount of funds spent on homelessness has reached record levels, the state has pushed back against calls to audit those funds, making sure that they're spent effectively. We'll start with you, Ms. Rose. How do you hold local jurisdictions and contractors who receive these funds accountable and make sure that the funds actually reduce homelessness?
I think we needed to look at accountability before we lost billions of dollars. This question should have been asked first, not last. So now that we're in this situation, moving forward, if we have funding, which I think in the deficit that we're in, I'm not sure where we have funding to continue to support homelessness, but we need to hold each community accountable. If you get funding and your homelessness population is increasing, then clearly that funding wasn't being used effectively. It's kind of like the same thing I witnessed working at EDD during the pandemic. There was just kind of a free-for-all of solve these problems and throw money at it, and now we're all left holding the bag. Taxpayers are left with the burden of spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money to solve a problem that's actually gotten worse. Homelessness has increased since we've spent all this money, and so we need to focus on healthy opportunities for people to have the help that they need. Mental health is a big driver. Drug addiction is a big driver. Crime is a big driver of homelessness. There's no accountability. So, when we look at accountability as a tax auditor for EDD for many years, not only do we need to hold our politicians accountable for their policies, but we need to hold the people we're giving money to accountable. And we also need to hold everyday citizens accountable. You can't just walk in and steal things 18 times in a row and have no accountability, but that's not the case right now. So some of this stuff could get cleaned up if we had accountability across the board, both fiscally and personal moral behaviors. So I really would like to dive in as an auditor. I think there's lots of things we can do to incentivize agencies locally to use their money in a way that does see an impact to reduce homelessness.
Understood. And Assemblymember Soria, the same question for you.
Thank you for that question. And this was a question that I even asked myself when I was a council member, because the city of Fresno at the time received millions of dollars to renovate hotels, make them into low barrier shelters. And my number one question, I still remember asking HBs, who no longer is with us, saying, hey, Mr. Spees, what are we going to do after the 90 days are up for this temporary shelter? We don't have enough permanent housing for individuals to transition them out. And so now that while I'm in Sacramento, I've supported policy, and unfortunately the governor vetoed this piece of legislation that would hold local cities accountable for seeing actually reductions in homelessness. The other thing that I want to make sure that I focus on, because I represent 14 cities, and I will tell you that out of the 14 cities, only 3 of the cities that I represent have received millions of dollars for homelessness. There are the cities of Mendota, there are the cities of Livingston, there are the cities of Fireball. They are also experiencing homelessness, and they're not getting 1 penny from the state of California. I want to change that. Because I believe that these communities also deserve to have these types of investments, but they also have to be accountable, that if we do give them the resources, that they make sure that we are transitioning folks not just temporarily, but that we are shifting them into permanent housing. And that's why building more permanent housing of all kinds, affordable, market rate buildings, and then also apartment buildings, and then also homes. That's what we need to do. What the city of Fresno just did recently, where it rejected hundreds of apartments that we're going to build in Northwest Fresno. That's the kind of stuff that the state of California has to go after, that we have to hold our cities accountable for building more, because we are the ones, the local communities are creating their own problems.
So it's actually a good segue into this next question. While the governor has said that housing and homelessness are issues that should be solved at the local level, the data shows that some of the bigger jurisdictions like LA and the Bay Area have received the lion's share of that $1 billion that was approved. And some of the smaller jurisdictions, like in this district, have received no funds. And so sticking with you, Assemblywoman Soria, you were just raising this point. What will you do to make sure that smaller and rural communities are getting a fair share?
We need to make sure that these dollars, that these communities are eligible for these dollars that are made available for the larger cities. I think there needs to be a carve out. We do it with every type of program, depending on the number of population that each community has. And so I believe that small rural communities deserve to have a fair share of investment. As I mentioned, I went to Mendota and visited not that long ago, and you see farm workers living in shanty homes. You also see people doubling up and tripling up in homes. Essentially, they're homeless, but for someone's compassion of giving them a couch or their makeshift garage in their backyard. And so, for me, it's important to not just be an advocate in Sacramento, but actually deliver the real results. And I think in my 2-year, I have a track record of actually bringing investments into the community. We're not just talking, and saying that we're going to do things. We've actually done it. I did it here while I was a city councilwoman in the city of Fresno, and I've continued that track record in Sacramento by, again, bringing tangible investments into these small rural communities. Just like I did for Mendota, they want a community center because they don't have a place where their seniors, their veterans, even their unhoused can get a hot meal. Well, guess what? The community of Mendota will now have a community center because we were able to bring them $8 million. Those are the types of things that I've already proven that I can get done with my advocacy and the fact that I know how things work in Sacramento.
Ms. Rose, moving on to your ideas, how would you ensure that the district gets some of that money?
I think we have to start by looking at what's going on in the state of California as a whole, and we've had zero balance for 20 years. We don't have people having voices in the state of California. It's one party that is in control, and they've showed how they're going to allocate money. Clearly, they've only given it the lion's share to big cities where the mass voters are, so they can continue to remain in office, and that's not solving our problems. Our biggest issue to do with housing is making things affordable in general. If you make housing affordable, you do that by making everything affordable. If jobs are going up, if businesses are prospering, if energy is affordable and not raising 4 times a year with no advocacy by the legislature to stop that, we're going to continue to see these problems. Housing is just one thing that's connected to all of those other things, and you can't tax us into prosperity. And I think that's the issue with the state of California, is the people that have been in charge think that they can continue to tax taxpayers into being prosperous. And that's one of the things that I'm fighting against. We have a $70 billion deficit. So it's great that we got a little bit of money into our district, into our community, but that money is money that's basically going to get paid for later some other way. We got what, $400 million in our district in money. That's great. We're $70 billion in debt. So we got $400 million of borrowed money to solve problems that it's not solving. So we need to wake up, and we need to start doing things differently. We need to vote for balance in the state of California so that we can get energy here, we can get water here, we can have abundance instead of scarcity, and we can have businesses want to come back and build in California. That's the problem. Builders and developers are fleeing all of our over-regulations in the state of California. So you're not going to see a change with that by increasing taxes.
Thank you. We'll now turn to questions on healthcare and the cost of living.
Is there any opportunity to rebuttal?
You may have a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, I have an issue with her saying, my opponent saying that these investments won't make a difference. Well, a community center will make a difference in the city of Mendota. $100 million for affordable housing for over 500 students in Merced County will make a difference. $57 million to reopen a closed hospital that would have otherwise stayed permanently closed will make a difference. Those are the types of things that I've delivered to our community that are going to make a difference, especially in the most vulnerable communities here. So I take issue with her comment.
Is there rebuttals to rebuttals?
You may have a 30-second response, but then I'm afraid we have to move on.
Yes. Well, I'm not saying that locally it's not going to make a difference. I'm saying that if you give someone a community center, that's great. That impacts their community. But then when they continue to have to pay 50 cents more a gallon, we just had closures of refineries across the state of California. So the things that they're doing are just Band-Aids. They're not actually solving our problems. We need things to be affordable. Gas, food, energy, utility bills are running through the roof, and businesses are fleeing because of those expenses. So that's what I mean by what I was saying.
Thank you. We'll now turn to questions on healthcare and the cost of living.
The San Joaquin Valley has fewer nurses here per capita than any other region in the state. Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed legislation aimed at increasing access to a nursing education. One of the bills was authored by Assemblymember Soria. Assemblymember Soria, what other avenues would you pursue in the legislature to increase the number of nurses in the Valley?
That's a good question. I'm going to continue to introduce this piece of legislation because I think in the long run it will make a difference, and it will get authored. You know, I will say that I was a little disappointed that Fresno State and the president did oppose, and the state universities across oppose this piece of legislation, but we do need to make this education and training programs much more accessible, because I will tell you what is happening is that our students in the rural communities are opting to go to private universities, which are very costly. They graduate with like $70,000 in debt, and many of them not being able to afford to actually stay in the Valley, so they go to a bigger city where they're paid more. Or they end up not pursuing a degree in nursing and not being able to fill that workforce. We're going to have a 10,000 number in terms of shortage of nurses here in this region. That's why it's so critical that this piece of legislation gets looked at. We're looking at in a pilot basis. We're just trying to make sure that the Fresno City College, Madera, Merced College, even West Hills College has an opportunity to offer these bachelors in nursing so that our students can get trained. Those 30 additional units that they can take after they've received their AA, they can actually stay in their community college, which is more affordable. The student will stay in their community, which the likelihood of them then staying and working at their local clinic or any hospital that is in their nearby community will be an option for them. And that's what we're going to continue to do in the next legislative session.
And Ms. Rose, what are some examples of policy you would propose to address the shortage of healthcare professionals in the Valley?
I think the shortage that we have in the Valley is not necessarily due to the lack of education opportunities. As someone who commuted from Chowchilla to Fresno for many, many years during my Fresno State time and my San Joaquin College of Law time, it's a sacrifice, yes, but it's not that far. And, we need to incentivize people to want to stay here. Wages here are terrible. Things are expensive. There's not a lot of opportunity. So we really need to focus on building up the community and incentivizing people to want to be here in the Central Valley rather than flee to some other bigger city with a bigger paycheck. There's not a lot of housing. A lot of these rural communities that are great to live in don't have a lot of new housing opportunities. And that's because developers are leaving the state. Businesses are leaving the state. Careers are leaving the state. We can also focus on things helping to do with teleworking and making things more affordable. I know as someone who was able to telework, it became very unaffordable during COVID when our utility bills were going through the roof. Our utility bill went from $300 to $1,000 a month just because I was staying at home and I didn't want to die of heat stroke in 115-degree weather. So I think we really need to approach affordability in order to get people to want to be here. No one wants to be here when it's $1,000 a month and 115. I think that's one of our bigger problems is the enticing people to want to stay in the Valley or come to the Valley for a good career opportunity. So, there's lots of schools you can go to, UC Merced, Fresno State, junior colleges, but there's not a lot of training programs, mentorship programs, and there's not a lot of incentives to get people to work in the Valley. So those are the things I want to advocate for.
So this year, the legislature threw a lifeline to hospitals that were facing or faced financial collapse. That some of that funding certainly is benefiting hospitals like Madera Community Hospital, which pretty soon is scheduled to reopen. But even as it reopens, it's not going to have labor and delivery services. And this is a growing issue across the state, which with a lot of hospitals closing those services. The governor has signed a bill to ensure that communities are given advance notice when those services are closing. But the question is, for Assemblywoman Soria, how would you ensure that there is transparency from hospitals as far as the type of services that they offer, how they're using state funds, and whether they're adequately serving the community's needs?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I will say that I'm very proud to have led the efforts that created the Distress Hospital Loan Program, which totaled $300 million that not just is helping Madera reopen its doors, but actually saved Cahuilla Delta from closing. Which is also a lifeline here for many families in the Valley. One of the things that it's important is the oversight that HCI has over these hospitals, that we keep oversight and making sure that every single dollar and penny that we're investing through this Distress Hospital Loan Program is used properly. And you've mentioned the labor and delivery. That's a very, very important issue for me, and for this next legislative session is a top priority. One of the things that a lot of people don't know, that actually labor and delivery doesn't get reimbursed or the hospitals don't get reimbursed the total cost of what it costs to deliver a baby. And so we need to revisit how we're doing reimbursements so that hospitals have an incentive to continue to provide these services. Again, a hospital has to at least break even in order to be able to keep its doors open. So we know that that was a big issue with Madera Hospital. So one of the issues that I will continue to work along with Dr. Akila Weber, who also this year introduced several pieces of legislation that would go, one, the notification piece, which is important, but two, that we also figure out a mechanism and reasoning why are these delivery places closing. Especially here in the Valley, there is no reason why a community like Madera, with the sizable population and the fact that it's still a growing community, a lot of babies were being delivered on a monthly basis. Those services are needed. Families shouldn't have to drive 40 minutes or over an hour to deliver their babies. And so we also need to look at other types of programs, like we've invested more recently in doulas, and how we're focusing in these community, more centered types of programs so that we're providing the resources that these small communities need.
Ms. Rose, to you the question, do you think access to healthcare, especially for expecting mothers, women, and children, is adequate in District 27, and what would you do to improve it?
It's absolutely not adequate. It's heart-wrenching to know that for the last couple years, mothers could not safely deliver their children in Madera Community Hospital or in Madera County. I lived in Madera all through my college years. I recently moved to Merced County with my husband to get remarried and raise our son. But Madera Community is where I gave birth to my son, It's where that same doctor that delivered my baby and saved his life also saved my life. He did my cancer surgery that saved my life. And I was really upset when I saw that it was closing. I actually signed a waiver in March of 2022, delivering my son, refusing to be transferred because the L&D was already closed. I think that California has fallen short. The legislature has fallen short. They were on notice months, many months, back in March, before that there was financial issues within Madera community because the L&D was closed by the state of California for lacking equipment, and they didn't have the funds to get that equipment. So it is unacceptable. The state should have intervened before it ever even closed, and that's why we have to have balance back in California. We need legislative balance where people can't just one-sided pass everything they want to pass and look over the Central Valley and the rural communities. We have to advocate for these mothers to have a safe place like I did to deliver in Madera community. So it's great that you got money to reopen a hospital. It's great that you talk about having accountability, but there's really been no proof of changes in leadership and the reason why the community hospital was closed to begin with. And there's really not a clear pathway to make sure that we are going to get a labor and delivery opened. It should have never closed to begin with. The legislature should have stepped in right away.
Can I respond to that?
You may have a 30-second
Yeah,
rebuttal.
thank you. I want to remind folks that I wasn't in the legislature at the time when the hospital was closed. I came in at the tail end, and so we made attempts to bring the resources. And I will remind folks, actually Assemblymember Bigelow was the representative of this community. And so absolutely, he should have been fighting to get resources to make sure that those doors never close. And that's the difference in Sacramento. I will be actually able to deliver real results.
I'd like a rebuttal to that.
30 seconds, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to point out that when Assemblymember Bigelow was in office, we've continued to have a supermajority, and Democrats in leadership have refused to do what's pertinent and healthy and good for taxpayers, and they just follow their party line and they shut down people. The only way we're going to see a change in that is if you start electing people that are different and we get the balance back. So, you know, it is devastating what had happened in Madera Community Hospital, but I think if we wanted to see changes, we could have had them in 2 years, and we don't.
Thank you.
Moving on, and we'll continue with you, Ms. Rose. You know, the governor signed a bill last month that will require hospitals to meet some pretty seismic standards by 2030. Many hospitals in this district currently don't meet those requirements and don't necessarily have the resources to do so. If elected, what is your plan to help those rural hospitals stay open, keep those facilities safe, and up to code?
I didn't hear the first part of the question, but
Oh, understood. Yeah. The governor has signed a bill last month that will require hospitals to meet seismic standards by 2030.
Seismic standards. Okay, thank you. I mean, really, it's about getting that balance and focusing on keeping hospitals open and having the funding there. The problem in the rural communities that we're facing is majority of the people in rural communities are in Medi-Cal, and Medi-Cal does not pay the amount that's necessary for hospitals to be sustainable, let alone do major improvements like seismic preparedness. And so as someone who was on Medi-Cal and had a surgery on Medi-Cal, it took months. I was in pain for 8 months, and so there's a lack of efficiency in the state Medi-Cal agencies and the federal agencies, and we need to clean that up. We need to make sure that people are not slipping through the cracks, and we need to address the reimbursable amounts and make sure that there's adequate amounts to cover that, so that the hospitals can have that plus zero and not be operating in a deficit, which is a little bit, I think, difficult for the state of California just because they're used to operating in a deficit. So businesses can't operate in a deficit. So we need to make sure that we're addressing those issues as far as reimbursable funding goes. And there's just a lack of efficiency across the board in every state agency and every department. I've seen it as an auditor. I've seen it as a business manager in California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. There are literally instances that I could spout out over and over again. I've seen millions of dollars, $4 million in one instance, just flushed down a toilet. Why? Because we had to hurry up and spend the money or we would lose the money. The state of California needs a complete overhaul of how they run their institutions and what they're doing so that they can stop raising taxes and start using what they have effectively and efficiently to solve a lot of problems.
And the same question goes for you, Assemblymember.
I believe the question was about seismic standards, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. So I will say that I was a proud supporter of a piece of legislation that was authored by Senator Ana Caballero that dealt with this issue. And it got through the legislature. It was a compromise. I think that it was a balanced policy where it took into account worker safety, but at the same time took into the account the realities that many rural hospitals are experiencing today. And so I was very disappointed with Governor Newsom that he actually vetoed this piece of legislation that would have made a significant difference for hospitals here in our valley. We will continue to push this issue because I do believe that our hospitals, especially the ones in these rural communities, are significantly challenged and don't have the extra dollars to be able to cover the millions of dollars that it will cost a hospital to do any retrofits. We are in an area where we are not common to, earthquakes, which I think that's why these seismic standards, but we do need to have plans in place that with goals that are reasonable to accomplish in a timely fashion so that our hospitals can meet those standards. But I also think that the timelines have been kind of overburdened or too short for many of the small hospitals that don't have those extra dollars. So we will continue to work on that issue because we want to make sure that there's sustainability in rural hospitals in our community.
And speaking about hospitals, and Ms. Rose, you mentioned Medi-Cal reimbursements. In the Valley, the high amount of Medi-Cal patients deters private providers from working here and contributes to the provider shortage. So, Ms. Rose, how can the legislature ensure that fair reimbursement rates can be achieved for small healthcare systems to ensure profitability for private providers here?
I think we need to increase the reimbursement amounts. We need to look at those and figure out how we increase the reimbursement amounts. But again, we're having a deficit, we're having a shortfall. So we really need to dig in and audit what we're using our money for and make sure that we're using it accordingly, because until we dive in and find money somewhere, you can't reallocate it somewhere else. It's great that we have thoughts. We want to protect people from seismic issues, or we want to have higher reimbursements so smaller facilities don't close. But we have to find where we're going to get that money from. And there's lots of places we can get that money from if you know where to look. But no one in the legislature seems to know where to look because we're still in a deficit. So we really need to focus on that. And also, I think that if you had the prosperity and the abundance going on here in the Central Valley, there would be less of a need for Medi-Cal. You have to rise people up to come out of poverty and be into prosperity through education, through resources, through the economy and the environment in which we live in. And as long as we continue to have bureaucratic overregulation in the state of California, as long as we continue to be the least business-friendly state in the union, we will continue to see these problems because no one wants to be here except for the people who are poor and stuck here. They don't have a choice. So we need to give them opportunities to have good jobs, good educations, and rise above that. And we're not going to see those things happen while we continue to overregulate everyone. The more rules we put in place, the more restrictive we become, the less constitutional we are, the more problems we're going to face. And that's what I want to bring to the legislature, is getting things back to the basics and getting people accountable for what they're doing, and stop tying people's hands from being successful. Stop tearing people down and let's build people up.
Thank you for that question. Actually, the state legislature took action this year. If we all heard, there was the health plans that worked with the legislature to find these extra dollars to be able to increase Medi-Cal reimbursement rates. And so this fiscal year, that's what we're seeing. And actually, there's a proposition on the ballot this November to make sure that those dollars actually stay for Medi-Cal purposes, because I know that sometimes in Sacramento, people want to take these dollars and then use them for something else. And so I'm a supporter of the proposition because I think that those dollars need to stay within our Medi-Cal program, because we do want to see more private providers that right now are not taking Medi-Cal patients to want to enter and actually provide the services, because they are being compensated a fair reimbursement. And that's what I'm a strong supporter of, and I will continue to advocate. That's why I was proud to actually support the efforts to ensure that those Medi-Cal reimbursement rates. Again, on the labor and delivery issue, that's still a challenge. We're going to have to continue to find creative solutions so that we do have also these Medi-Cal patients have the ability to deliver their babies in communities like Madera. And those are the things that I will continue to work on.
And while Medi-Cal expansion has already improved health outcomes for undocumented immigrants, the redetermination process has disqualified many Latino patients, and the program's inefficient systems may hinder more people from signing up. What can be done to sustain expanded coverage? Assemblymember Soria, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I've been a strong supporter of Medi-Cal for all folks. As a daughter of farm worker immigrants that came here undocumented and lived undocumented until they were able to legalize their status. It would have been great to have programs like this available so that we didn't have to end up in the emergency room and then costing the taxpayer, 10 times more. And so making sure that this program is working effectively and efficiently for this very vulnerable population, I think it's very important. One of the things that I know the state has done is worked in partnership with a lot of CBOs that have presence in these small communities that are trusted partners to make sure that not only they enroll, but that they continue to re-enroll and that we educate individuals. Sometimes going through this bureaucratic process and these applications, they're very onerous. And if you have a limited English ability, if you have a limited education, it's even a greater barrier. So we have to look at how we invest with partners that are on the ground, that are already dealing with these vulnerable populations and these populations that would benefit from Medi-Cal. Again, because an early investment and them being part of the Medi-Cal program will avert them having to end up in the emergency room, which is much more costly to the taxpayer. So we again need to continue to invest in those types of programs that have proven to work. And we've seen it, right? Because we saw record numbers of people enroll into this Medi-Cal program.
Candidates, this question is for both of you.
I think Ms. Rose, would you like an opportunity to answer the question?
Can you give me a brief recap of the question? Just I kind of got sidetracked.
Sure. While Medi-Cal expansion has already improved health outcomes for undocumented immigrants, the redetermination process has disqualified many Latino patients, and the program's inefficient systems may hinder more people from signing up. What can be done to sustain expanded coverage?
Okay, yes. There are tons and tons of inefficiencies, as I mentioned, within all state programs, but Medi-Cal has a lot of inefficiencies that can be cleaned up. As someone who has slipped through the cracks, I don't think it should have taken me 9 months to have a gallbladder removed. I don't think anyone if it was something more urgent than that, someone's life could have been lost. So there are lots of things we can do. There's lots of technology. Usually the state of California agencies are kind of the last to the list of technology. I can just tell you that from my decade of experience working in the state of California that, it's a balance of what's responsible because it's very expensive to implement these things. But if you look at the expense not only of lives being lost, but also the expense of having procedures that are more expensive done later that could have been picked up sooner, we really need to look at what we're doing to implement and fast track those things so that all patients that are getting care are being given an opportunity to have care at the lowest point, not the most expensive point, not when they're in the ER. And I think we need to just look at sustainability of what's going on in the state of California. We've got many businesses that are exiting. All of these programs get run by taxpayer dollars. They get run by either us, consumer tax dollars, or business tax dollars. And when you have Chevron and Phillips 66 just announced they're closing their refinery, when you have all these businesses exiting the state of California, it's going to be a bigger burden this next year for keeping things like Medi-Cal, saving lives, for keeping those things in place. We're going to have a real struggle with that. So we really need to increase technology and make sure that we've got the resources available to get people fast-tracked in their care so that it's a more effective and efficient opportunity for us as the state.
Moving on to talking about the cost of insurance, and this question will be for both candidates. Residents in the Central Valley have long contended that costs from insurance in the region is becoming an untenable burden for them. A recent study this year by the California Healthcare Foundation said that 63% of Central Valley residents report skipping or delaying care due to costs in the last year, while 3 in 4 worry about being able to afford out-of-pocket health expenses or unexpected medical bills, a rate much higher than the rest of the state. We'll start with you, Rose. What possible solutions could you present to the state legislature to help alleviate the cost burden brought on by these high insurance costs?
I mean, insurance in every aspect is skyrocketing along with everything else that's skyrocketing in California. So again, if you want to see something different, we have to kind of balance the state. We're not going to see anything different if we continue to have control one-sided. The insurance companies are not being restricted or limited in any way by the state as far as what they're doing. And this isn't just health insurance. Health insurance is vital. People need to have their health insurance, and it needs to be affordable. But it's all insurances, homeowners insurance, car insurance. I know tons of people that are getting dropped off their homeowners insurance. We're now getting state programs, just like we have state insurance programs, Medi-Cal, because private insurance is too expensive. Well, what's the reasoning for that? The reasoning for that is that no one wants to be in California because it's overregulated and it's not a positive state to be in. We're not getting insurance companies coming into California, they're leaving California. So it's a supply and demand issue. If there's less suppliers and a big demand, which we have a huge demand in California, it's going to be more expensive because there's less resource available. So this goes back to, again, getting the abundance in California, not just for water, not just for jobs, and not just for resources, but also for agencies coming back. Insurance company is a business. They're leaving because it's not a business-friendly climate to be in. We need to incentivize businesses to come back so that we can have a bigger supply to meet our demand and therefore lower prices. The only way you're going to see that is voting for change in November and balancing California.
And Assemblymember, the same question for you.
Thank you for that question. That is a significant issue, not just in the state of California, but throughout our country, where healthcare costs continue to go up. Obviously, inflation also being problematic and making this issue even worse. One of the things that the state of California can do is really make sure that we're investing in prevention. We know that prevention works. We know that prevention will lower costs. And then we can also pass policies to cap costs for life-saving drugs. We've seen it done at the federal level. We've done it at the state level. And that's what we need to continue to do to ensure that we are not putting working families in a situation where they have to choose whether they're going to go to the doctor or whether they're going to go refill their prescription because they can't afford to pay something else. The other thing that we need to do is we need to demand that the state of California invest in the quality of life of folks here in the Central Valley. We are a region that continues to be underinvested, has been historically underinvested. We need to see more parks. We need to see better infrastructure. We need to figure out innovative ways and ways to clean our air. Those are all issues that impact the health outcomes of our community. And so we need to demand more. That's why I'm in Sacramento, and we've already seen progress in the first 2 years with investments coming in that will help us in the long run. And we need to also continue to build our economy. We are the 5th largest economy, and people may want to say, oh, people are leaving in droves. The state of California is probably one of the best states in the union, where we have so many resources and we can continue to achieve not just the American dream, but that California dream. We just have to demand that Sacramento invest in our community, and that's what I will continue to do in my tenure.
Am I able to rebut any of that?
You may have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I just have a hard time with that. Yes, we are the 5th largest economy in the world, and we are a great state. We are the best state in the union, but we are not the best business-friendly state, and people are leaving. As a tax auditor for the state of California for EDD, I was sent to Texas to audit businesses that were doing business here in California last summer. And do you know what all 5 of those large businesses said? nothing to do with California ever again after this audit. It's very upsetting.
Thank you.
Moving on briefly to energy. Ms. Rose, this question is for you first. Central Valley residents and businesses have seen record high utility bills as the CPUC has approved 4 rate increases this year. What will you do to rein in PG&E and lower the energy costs for constituents? What will you do to make solar and clean energy options more accessible and affordable for working class families in the district?
I mean, first and foremost, we need to hold the CPUC accountable. The legislature, the governor, we need to hold these people accountable. They're not advocating for the everyday consumer like you and I. They're not helping us have lower power bills. They're supposed to be there so that we don't have, just rate hikes over nothing. They're supposed to look into it and make sure that it's okay. And they just give a rubber stamp approval every time. We've had 4 approvals this year, as you said, and there's no accountability. I've seen no legislation to curb energy issues that's been successful. And we've got the supermajority. They have complete control, and yet here they are leaving us for the last 2 years, the last 20 years, with crippling utility bills. And it's very frustrating as someone who has had high utility bills. Fortunately, we were able to have a good solar program, but you're right, there aren't incentives to help people who need to get that. And there's a lot of people in Mendota, I've heard about it, and other cities as I've traveled around, who got solar because they thought it would help them, and they didn't get the right solar. They didn't get the right amount that they needed. And so now they are burdened by this huge solar bill on top of a huge electric bill or a huge true up. So they're having to make that choice between power and food, power and gas to get to work. And so we need the legislature to hold these people accountable. These people are all, they're not elected, they're unelected bureaucrats. We need our electeds to hold people accountable and stop giving authority to unelected bureaucrats.
And Assemblywoman Soria, you have worked to help initiate a massive solar project on the west side. What will you do to ensure that those big solar projects actually lower utility costs for residents? And what have you done, or what will you do to rein in PG&E and the CPUC about these bills?
Thank you for that question. One, I do feel that we need more oversight over the actions of the CPUC. We need to figure out what we need to do to ensure that we are lowering these energy costs, because it is crippling a lot of small businesses. It is impacting the lives of working families up and down the state. A couple things before I talk about AB 2661, which we were able to pass it in a bipartisan fashion and also get signed by the governor. But other things that I've done, I've supported weatherization programs so that our working families can afford the investment so that they don't see the utility bills, especially in the cold winters and in the hot summers. The thing that was important for me as I proposed AB 2661, which will provide the opportunity to build clean energy and us meet the very ambitious goals that California has by the Central Valley being a leader in that, that we incorporated a community benefit piece to the piece of legislation. And so over the course of the next few months and the next year, we're going to be working in partnership, which we've already started with all the small cities that are in the west side, along with Westlands Water District and Fresno County, to devise a program that, one, will provide direct relief to families that live in this jurisdiction to see lower energy bills. And so we're very, very proud of the work and the fact that Westlands is on board. We're exploring options like community solar to, again, lower people's energy costs, not just for the homes, but also for the small businesses that reside in these small communities. And we need to look at more different sources of energy. Senator Caballero also got a bill that would allow us to produce more hydrogen here in the Valley. Those are good paying jobs that are going to provide other alternative sources of energy that could be more affordable.
And then one final question on the rising cost of living candidates, and this question will be for the both of you. Among those tough financial decisions families feel forced to make, residents in this district in particular have drawn special attention to the rising costs of gas. Proposals to try and lower that cost have ranged from proposals to increase oil drilling in the valley to recent the state passing legislation to try and regulate the established oil industry to try and keep them accountable. We'll start with you, Ms. Rose. What would you say is the solution to try and help lower those prices?
I mean, I think we've had a bunch of solution opportunities, and the Democrat supermajority continues to reject them. So as long as we continue to elect these people into office, they're going to continue to leave us with the burden of rising gas prices. Even what they just passed now is going to increase gas prices by another 50 cents. And so we really need to get things back to happening here in California. As long as we outsource things and have things coming in, we're going to continue to have these problems. Having additional storage isn't going to change anything to do with the supply and demand. And some of the regulations that they've just passed is actually going to do the opposite, because you have companies now fleeing the state of California because of its continued overreach and overburden. That's really tough, because as a kid who remembers my mom not getting her medication because she wanted to make sure she could buy our medication, there's families that are struggling, and getting gas in your car is how you get to work, how you have that money to pay to feed your family. And so we have to stop, and we need to start. There's been multiple bills on the floor that didn't get approved, that weren't passed in this special session, that weren't voted for by the Democrats, and it could have ended a lot of the problems that we're having right now, and they choose not to do it, and we're going to continue to suffer the consequences until we wake up.
And Assembly Member, the same question for you.
You're absolutely right. Inflation has hit, families really hard, especially here in the Valley. And so as someone that comes from a working family and have seen the impacts of, what inflation does to families that live off of low wages, we can't afford to put more cost add more cost, especially right now where we're finally beginning to see inflation come down a little bit. And so we're seeing a little bit of light, but we need to wait to really see light at the end of the tunnel. That's why I was proud to have been one of the only few Democrats that opposed the governor's proposal, because there was nothing in the governor's proposal that guaranteed that prices wouldn't go up. Actually, the director of CEC said that prices of gas would go up. They would go up in a flatter way rather than see the spikes. I don't think that for me, I could vote for something that creates such a risk and there are no guarantees for our families, because our families need relief. So what we need to do, we need to continue to support the programs that exist here in the Valley, like the clean car program, to make sure our families are driving cars that are either electric or rely less on the very expensive gas. We also got to look at investing in our public transportation system. The city of Fresno has done a pretty good job. Our other small cities are trying to build the rural transit, and those are other mechanisms that are more affordable sources of transportation that we also need to invest in. And so those are the things that I will continue to do. And in the next legislative session, look at other opportunities to see what we can do to improve, or to minimize the cost increases that we've seen families have to go through.
If I may, I'll do a quick 30 seconds.
You may have 30 seconds.
I just think that the incumbent had an opportunity to not only vote against the governor's plan, but to actually vote for plans that would solve problems that were on the floor that she did not vote for. And I think that as a state worker and someone who makes fair money in the district, I can't afford a new electric car, so I don't know how everyone's supposed to just go out and buy a brand new car and have it be afforded. And again, we want to incentivize people to buy new cars, but where does this money come from? It's all just lip service with no money attached to help taxpayers.
Assembly, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, if you actually look at my track record and you watch the votes during special session, there were a couple of times that I voted with the Republicans because I did believe that they had a proposal that would have provided some relief to the Valley. So I'm not apologetic about my votes, because my votes were reflective of the needs of the Central Valley.
Thank you both. Our next set of questions is about climate change and the environment.
Assemblywoman Soria, you have advocated for incentive-based approaches to reduce methane and other greenhouse gas emissions as part of California's climate strategy, from the low carbon fuel standard to electrifying trucks. But environmental advocates say that these approaches aren't helping rural communities fast enough to clean their air and water. Do you think it's possible for the dairy industry to thrive while cleaning up air and water quality in surrounding communities?
Absolutely. I've actually had the opportunity to visit a number of the different communities that have dairies in their cities, or in the outskirts in the counties. And what we're seeing, and we look at the data with dairy digesters, and I'm a supporter of these dairy digesters because the data shows that it's working. We're seeing significant reductions. Do we have to do more? Absolutely, we have to do more, but we have to invest in programs that have proven data. And I believe that it is a win for the community. We can do other things, which the state of California this year, I had the opportunity to sit on the working group for the climate bond, which is making historic investments in a variety of different things to, again, tackle the issues, especially the air quality issues that we're having here in the Central Valley. But I do have to say, one of the things, the reality is that our agriculture economy is the #1 industry here in the Valley. If we don't have ag jobs, then we won't have the small communities like Huron and Mendota, and even where I grew up, Lindsay. I remember when we had the big freeze in 1990, there were no jobs. And guess what my family had to do? We had to move to Arizona to be able to get a job and survive. And so I don't want to see these communities disappear because we're just putting overburdensome regulations on the ag industry, which they've demonstrated that they want to be part of the solution. And so I think that the best way is to bring them to the table, continue to have the conversations, and continue to invest in innovation. And like the UC Merced experimental farm, smart farm that they are trying to build, so that we can continue to study and research and base our solutions off of the research and data that proves that we're going to have good outcomes for our environment.
And Ms. Rose, you have cited the cost of cleaning up water contamination as a reason to reevaluate state mandates. If elected, what would be your policy approach to addressing the impacts of climate change and pollution from industries located in the Central Valley, such as dairies and poultry factories?
I mean, we need to obviously have the foresight to plan to make things be clean, but we have to also look at the expense of what that is. We don't want to see businesses fail or close. We need to be intelligent about it. And I think that one of the biggest things that frustrates me as someone who was farming and had a lot of these regulations is they push small farmers out of business because they're a huge burden, and you just can't afford to have your 40 acres or your 100 acres and keep up with it. So the only people that are left are people with thousands of acres that are owned by corporations. So we really need to be careful about balancing that. And, a dairy might cause damage, and we might be able to, do micro digesters or have some sort of thing in place to help reduce that. But it all gets wiped away in 3 seconds when there's a fire. If you look at the Creek Fire, Paradise Fire wasn't here, but I remember working at EPA headquarters at the time of the Paradise Fire, and we actually got evacuated from the building because for a long time, actually, and people were having to wear masks because there was so much contamination from these fires. So, we're nitpicking and focusing on ag in the valley, but we're not doing anything to make sure that we're having good forest management, and we're keeping these one-time disasters that cause more effects to the carbon footprint and to our air in the valley, especially it comes in the valley and it can't get out. We're not doing anything to mitigate that. We're just trying to push small dairy farmers out of business. So I think policy-wise, yes, we need to come to the table with dairy farmers, and we need to do things that work, that are fiscally an option for small farmers, just like, small people who make less money. We need to keep an eye on those small businesses because that's someone's livelihood. And these fires that we've been having, they just wipe it all off the table in one blink of an eye. They eliminate everything we've done.
Understood. And our next questions are going to be revolving around the conditions of labor. We'll start with you, Assembly Member. Many workers in the agricultural, food processing, and warehousing industries in this district labor in extremely hot conditions, many of them without access to air conditioning. Labor advocates have pointed to a long backlog at Cal OSHA to enforce these worker safety standards, and Cal OSHA is even opening an office here in Fresno. Do you think having more local offices will increase worker safety, or is there an opportunity to do more?
I think worker safety always has to be a top priority, especially coming, a daughter of farm workers and seeing my parents and then accompanying my parents many hot summers out to the fields or to the places of work to help work ourselves. So I think it is important that we take care of our employees. One of the things that we need to focus on is enforcement of our current laws rather than continuing to add on. Is we have to enforce what we have. I know that we don't have adequate staffing, and that's a big issue. So I think having more local is going to be important, and we need to just focus on going after the egregious actors. I think that when there's egregious actors, we have to go after them. But I think most people will comply if you give them the opportunity. I will tell you, I have met countless employers, and they want to do the right thing. They want to be able to have the tools and the resources so that their workers are safe. Because guess what? If their workers are safe, they're more productive. If their workers are healthy, they're more productive. And we all know that. And so we want to make sure that workplace safety is a top priority, and so making sure that OSHA has the resources, but equally important, we've got to make sure that these employers also have the tools and the resources to comply with whatever regulations have been put on them and are requiring of them. And in particular, working with the small businesses, because I think a lot of times there are regulatory burdens that end up forcing small businesses to have to close because they cannot meet the additional costs. And so I do believe in, you have the carrot, but you also have the stick.
And Ms. Rose, for you, how would you address the backlog of worker safety complaints in the Central Valley? I mean, do you think that there's more the state should be doing to ensure that workers are protected from extreme heat and unsafe conditions?
I mean, it's like many state agencies. There's a huge backlog because of staffing issues, and we need to incentivize people to get these state jobs. We need to better advertise them. We need to make sure that they're competitive with the private sector. In OSHA alone, we have well over a 25% vacancy rate. So how can you expect 75% of staffers to keep up with a workload at a reasonable rate? So, I mean, I think it's indicative of what's happening with the hiring processes. And as someone who works for the state, it's really tough to work for the state. Employees for the state of California are not always happy employees. So it's harder to do a better job and to do a higher caseload because you just get so much dumped on you depending on what's going on in the budget. During times of surplus, state employees are very happy because nobody's, looking at you with a microscope and you're not being told to do 10 hours worth of work in 8 hours. If you look at the safety for the OSHA Bureau of Investigations, we have 2 investigators in OSHA that investigate the entire state of California when there's a death. So literally, if you have a serious injury, you're not going to get looked at unless you actually die, because we have a 67% investigation, 67% vacancy rate on that. So we really need to incentivize investigators to come and work. But it's the same thing we're dealing with California Department of Food and Ag. There's inspectors that come that inspect the food coming in because we're growing less food here in California. As we drive farming out, as we drive businesses out, we're growing less, and we have a shortage of inspectors, which is a problem. So we really need to look at what's going on with the state of California and why we aren't able to incentivize people to be here. And I think the reason why is because it's just so expensive. We need to make things affordable again, and we need to push policies that do that.
So we just experienced a very hot summer in California, and it's a state where many don't have adequate cooling inside their homes, and where by 2050, some climate models predict that heat deaths will increase annually. In your district are ranchers, farm workers, construction workers, landscapers who take on this heat head-on outdoors, and some of them may also take it on inside their homes. Assemblywoman Soria, some legislative actions are being taken to address this issue, but aside from some policy recommendations, how should the legislature step up to put residential cooling standards into law?
I've been a strong supporter of investments for weatherization programs. In the climate bond, we actually included investments also for a variety of resiliency centers and community both heating and cooling centers. And I think when I was in the city of Fresno, we opened up our community centers as cooling centers because we have seen the impacts of this extreme heat. You're right. Many families, especially our families that rent, they can't afford to maybe put solar, which then will make their energy bills, go less, and then they can use their AC a little bit more. Or some don't even have AC. I grew up in a house where we had a swamp cooler. I can't imagine having a swamp cooler today under 115 degrees or plus. And so we do have to make sure that we're planning accordingly, that we're putting investments so that there's opportunities for the existing, housing stock so that they can upgrade and provide the ability for families to be able to cool off in their own homes. And so I think that there's a lot of work to be done there. But those are the consequences of climate change, right? And so we have to look at how we address them, not just in providing the resources and the infrastructure to provide families better opportunities to be able to cool off or warm, but that we have to do things in our environment to reduce the climate change impacts.
And Ms. Rose, if elected, how would you ensure that the standard of living for those in your district, especially under these extreme climate conditions, are a priority in the legislature?
I mean, I definitely feel you with the heat issues. I was well drilling and sometimes worked 36 hours straight and during summer when it was very hot. And so, as the owner, I got to have the privilege of wearing shorts and boots, but for safety reasons, that would not be an OSHA situation. So it is really tough. You have to have cooling stations. You have to have resources, lots of water and things to help keep people's temperatures down. I mean, I know when I drilled in some places where there was no shade, if I didn't put a structure up to have shade, it's just a huge impact on you. And so, I think we get back to the problem of the government overreach, though. I don't think that we're going to solve the heat problem by having the government dictate that houses have to have different things. We need to have resources, community centers, places available. Lower energy costs would be very, very helpful. If we work to make us be an energy abundant state, we would have much cheaper energy costs so you could afford to run your air conditioning and keep yourself cooler. But the more restrictions and the more we do, the less we have as far as the supply goes. So you're going to have less housing and less people willing to provide it. The capital system works. Supply and demand works in America and in California. And the more we dictate things, the less that those things work and the more people slip through the cracks. So I don't want to see people slipping through the cracks because we continue to add additional burdens and regulations. I think we need to loosen things up a little bit so that we can have energy that is affordable here in California, whether it be power or gas or water, and that will help people be able to afford to keep themselves cool, to afford that $10,000 investment for the new air conditioning system that takes your PG&E bill from $1,000 a month to $500 a month. Those are things that we need to look at making sure people can do as those long-term improvements.
Ms. Rose, you claimed that the arsenic in the Livingston wells was naturally occurring, but the city's 2023 water quality report shows that the contamination of arsenic and TCP-123 comes from industry sources as well. But you are correct that many small municipalities cannot afford to clean up their water supply. What is your proposal to prevent contamination to small water systems and provide safe and affordable drinking water to residents?
I'm sure it can be put in the ground by industries, but a lot of locations have arsenic that's naturally occurring. So that was what I was citing when I was mentioning that. And so it's not really a rhyme or reason. It just does sometimes naturally occur. How that can be solved is by having water abundance, focusing on groundwater recharge, which has been starting to be done, but there's still a lot of bureaucratic red tape that makes it very difficult for a lot of people to do that. In addition to that, we don't have the surface water, we don't have the storage, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have desalinization. We've had a decade with bonds in place to do these things that voters voted to say, let's have more water, let's get water abundance, but the legislature has had a decade to do it and they haven't done it. So, that is one of the issues that can help solve Livingston and some of these small communities if they had surface water available to them. But right now we have so much demand for the surface water, we don't have a big enough to supply to accommodate it. And small communities that don't have a lot of money, like Livingston, are getting left out. So again, the response to that would be eliminating the red tape, getting water to be increased in all aspects, be it increasing storage, increasing desalinization, groundwater, every option that we have to get more water, we need to be actively pursuing it in a here, now, today, not yesterday, tomorrow, or in 20 years from now. And that will help those small communities have access to a cleaner water that can, you can mix it and have a cleaner water where it meets the particles that's required if they were to get actually non-contaminated water coming in from another source. So there are resources that we can advocate for. We just the state hasn't done it.
And Assemblymember Soria, the state's clean water program is short billions of dollars to clean up small water systems. Either ratepayers or industrial contaminators will have to foot the bill. Are we trying to solve a never-ending problem?
You're absolutely right, especially in the Valley. This is a huge, huge issue. I think a couple things need to do. One, we need to find ways to increase our water supply. I was proud that earlier in my tenure in the legislature, especially during the extreme war where we saw extreme weathers, we saw the extreme storms that we had, in the Merced County, we were able to expedite the flood program to be able to take the flood waters and recharge the aquifer. That's going to help. We also need to build the infrastructure so that we have above ground water resources that these small communities can tap into. The other thing that we need to take advantage of and promote more is consolidation. Actually, I worked here when I was in the city of Fresno. There's an incentive program that allowed the city of Fresno, as we were trying to build our treatment plant, that if we tied in the school of Orange Center, the school district, that if we tied them in, we actually got a 0% interest grant, or a loan that ended up converting into a grant to help us build a system big enough to be able to deliver clean water to a small school system that was right outside the city limits. So we need to look at a variety of different solutions for the issues, but one is we got to look at really our infrastructure so that we can tap into more surface water for these small communities, clean our groundwater by recharge, and what SGMA has done. We've seen the benefits of SGMA, even though there's been a lot of challenges, but we need to continue to build on that to see the fruits of those investments. And then again, like I said, the consolidation, looking at those opportunities for the small rural communities. Again, economies of scale.
Understood. I will now be moving on to a question on Proposition 36, and this will be for both candidates. In November, we have that proposition, which, among other things, will aim to roll back the reduction in severity of select nonviolent criminal and drug offenses brought on by Proposition 47 10 years ago. It will also introduce a new drug treatment program. Both of you endorse Proposition 36, though there are some critics that contend that harsher penalties and increased incarceration rates don't prevent crimes. We'll start with you, Assemblymember. Could you please go a bit more in depth with your stance on Proposition 36 and why you feel this is the correct solution to addressing crime and drug addiction anxieties in the district?
I think the common theme that I've heard as I've been campaigning, as I've been representing this district, is that people want to feel safe. People want to feel safe when they go shopping. People want to feel safe when they're running a business. Their employees should be safe. And there's been a lot of frustration with the smash and grabs and the retail theft that has impacted in a much more consequential way the small business. You can meet with many of the convenience store owners. They will tell you, with all the rising cost, and then they're experiencing retail theft, it ends up impacting their bottom line, whether they're going to, break even or not. And at the same time, they're worried and concerned about the safety of their employees. And so I think that we have to do something different. And I think for me, Prop 36 is something that will bring into balance. There were things in Prop 47 that we've learned from that could be modified and be changed so that our law enforcement officials have the resources and the tools necessary to essentially hold people accountable. I do believe that we have to hold people accountable, especially the repeat offenders. But I equally believe in rehabilitation. I think that we have to also invest in rehabilitative programs, drug addiction, so that we can help these individuals, and that if they meet the benchmarks, then they can go back and integrate into society. But people need to know that we mean business. And I will tell you, across the board, my community supports Prop 36. And I think that we need to do something different. But also, we need to continue to invest early on in prevention. And I'm a big supporter of that, investing in our public education system, investing in communities so that they have resources and amenities for our young people so that they stay busy in a positive way. And so those are the things that we need to do. But at the same time, we need to hold accountable repeat offenders. That's why I was actually proud that the bill that I introduced, AB 1960, was signed by Governor, which is part of Proposition 36.
Understood. And Ms. Rose, you endorsed Proposition 36 as well, so we'll ask you the same question.
Yes, I'm really proud to be the honorary co-chair for Assembly District 27 of the Yes on Prop 36. I'm a big advocate of it, personally impacted on a regular basis. Even just this last month, I asked my husband what happened to his windows, and homeless people just walk by and tap them, and he said, it's just going to be another $2,800. No big deal. I said, did you call the police chief? No, I didn't call the police chief. I didn't call the police. They don't do anything. There's nothing we can do. We just have to pay for it. And that happens over and over and over again. So I'm very excited about Prop 36 being a good first step. As someone who's worked at California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, who's toured fire camps, who's seen the positives of rehabilitation, but also seen the burdens that we face by not having people be held accountable, I'm a big advocate of it. But we need to look at the prevention that's out there. 90% of incarcerated people are victims of something. They suffered a trauma. They didn't have an education. They didn't have a resource. So we need to be more proactive with our tax dollars and making sure that we're giving kids a really good opportunity to have a job that leads to prosperity and not to poverty, where they then might turn to the life of crime, especially when it's almost incentivized because no one's being held accountable for the crimes that they're committing. So we really have to make sure that people are held accountable when they do these things, especially these repeat situations. It's very frustrating as someone who knows intimately. It's $132,000 plus per incarcerated person per year to incarcerate someone. So we really need to focus on holding people accountable, but eliminating that population, not by letting our streets run rampant, but by activating our kids to have a better opportunity in their life.
And the next question, Ms. Rose, your professional resume includes extensive education and experience in many disciplines. You previously ran for office, but you have never served as an elected official. What makes you qualified to serve in the legislature?
I think I have a lot of experience that will assist me being qualified in the legislature, besides my ag business degree from Fresno State, my Juris Doctorate from San Joaquin College of Law. I've served my community since the time I was 6 years old. I was a co-chair with my father as early as 16 on where we grew up, the Brentwood Corn Fest, volunteering. We made like tens of thousands of dollars that was donated to all the youth sports programs within my high school. I was a part of that every summer for my entire life. Even after I went to college, I would come home until about the time I was 24. I said, I can't help do this anymore. I live too far away. I was appointed to the Airport Advisory Board in the city of Chowchilla, where I lived. I've always been very active in my communities. I was elected Madera County Realtors Association as one of the board members, board of directors back in 2012 when I was a civil servant working in Sacramento at the Sex Offender Management Board in the Department of Parole. And so I've had a lot of opportunity to work with many different agencies and many different people, and I don't think the legislature is going to be any different than any of these different agencies or appointments that I've had. And I think we really need someone from the outside. Career corrupt politicians with all this fiscal waste is part of the problem that we have, not only in California, but everywhere. So I really, I hope that I'm empowering many other mothers, working mothers, and people within the community to step up and take an active role in what's going on in their community. You don't need experience. That's not required in our Constitution. In politics, I think our founding fathers would roll over if they saw the amount of career politicians we have. We need career people to serve as civil servants.
And Assemblymember Soria, you also have extensive education, but you jumped into politics much earlier in your professional career. Why should voters reelect you?
Thank you for that question. Well, voters should reelect me because I'm the only candidate actually that has a strong fiscal management. You can look at my record. I've balanced, not just 8 budgets when I was in the city of Fresno. I've also balanced budgets in the state legislature, and so I think my track record is very clear that not only have I represented historically communities that have been left out of conversations at tables, coming from being a daughter of farm worker immigrants that came to this country, an English language learner. I worked my way up to go to UC Berkeley, Davis, and I came back to this community to work and to give back, because that's what my mom taught me. My mom said, don't forget where you come from, and then to whom much is given, much is required. And yeah, I grew up in a very poor working family, but there was an abundance of love. There was an abundance of support to pursue my dreams. And my dream has always been to work on behalf of our community to make it better. That's what I've done in my entire life, from when I was in, elementary, middle school, high school. I've dedicated my life to serve other people because I know the benefits of being provided with a variety of different opportunities. And so I've demonstrated, not just in my last 2 years, but in my 10 years of being a public servant, that I represent working families, that I go to bat for working families, but more importantly, that I actually get things done. And I have a record of delivering over $500 million in investments that we would not have had come to this region. And so I'm proud of that, and I will continue to work hard as long as the voters of Assembly District give me the opportunity to work on their behalf, that I will do that while I'm in Sacramento.
I'd like a 30-second rebuttal to that, just if you don't.
Briefly, and then
Yes.
you have to move on.
I have balanced budgets. My current budget with the 9 institutions that I run at the director's office is $4 billion. When I took on the assignment, when I was elected to the board, Madera Association of Realtors, we had an embezzlement issue, and we had to work really hard to overcome that and balance budgets. On top of that, I've audited over 100 companies where I've had to review and ensure that things were balanced.
Thank you.
So speaking of a balanced budget and budgets, Ms. Rose, you have criticized spending by the Democratic supermajority in the state legislature as the cause of the state's multi-billion-dollar deficit. What specific programs or spending would you propose the state cut back on? And is there a multi-year policy solution that could potentially shrink the deficit?
I think so. I think we really need to get every state agency on board to incentivize cost savings behavior, and that's not happened. I've worked at EPA headquarters, I've worked at CDCR, I've worked at EDD. We don't have that. It's a use it or lose it mentality, not a savings productive mentality. So I would love to bring legislation with pilot programs, maybe 5 agencies to see. I've seen firsthand of literally millions of dollars of waste that could be cleaned up because people were rushed to hurry up and spend money. We should never hurry up and spend taxpayer dollars. We need to give people the ability to make decisions. Every agency is ran by people who are career executive assignments appointed by our governor. So if you want to be upset with what's happening in the state of California, you'd be upset with the leadership who's appointing people It's not necessarily state workers themselves. And we need to incentivize the savings. We need to incentivize fiscal responsibility, and we need to stop with the micromanagement. Micromanagement does not lead to success. We need to just let people do what they can do to save money and not penalize them for it. And then we need to hold them accountable if there is a shortcoming or a failure. And that's how we can solve the budget issues that are recurring in the state of California. This isn't our first cycle of a deficit. And we also need to incentivize businesses to come back to California. You know, revenue is something that I'd be very concerned about. Money coming in. As an auditor, I was auditing payroll taxes. With less jobs means less money, and that translates into sales tax and every other tax that we have. So we really need to incentivize businesses and people to be prosperous here in California and stop over-regulating them.
And Assemblymember Soria, Republicans have accused you of voting to raise taxes and collecting a paycheck as a politician. You are also part of the Democratic supermajority that your opponent blames for high state spending. What measures will you support in the legislature to reduce spending while continuing to deliver high-quality services through state programs?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Republicans are attacking me for raising the gas tax. That's what they're claiming in the mailers that they're sending. What they failed to tell voters is actually I was not a legislator when the gas tax was approved. What I did as a council member is I wanted to protect the revenues that the city of Fresno got to improve our infrastructure. Today, actually, the city of Fresno benefits of $15 million in monies for road repairs to help the 99, to help the neighborhood infrastructure. That's what those dollars are about. And also they try to mislead voters, but again, we're in campaign season, and so that's what people will do. And so they're trying to mislead voters and say that I gave myself a pay raise, which is factually untrue. If you think about legislators, actually there's an independent commission that does a review of salary increases. So legislators independently can't vote to increase their salaries. So again, Republican tactics is to mislead and not state the facts correctly. What I will say that I am proud that I've supported a budget that has been balanced, that has had a rainy day fund. And yeah, we've had challenges this year, but I've been committed to protecting core investments that help uplift families in this valley. And I'm not going to apologize for that because I have been a good steward of our taxpayer money, and I will continue to make sure that we get our fair share of investments. I will continue to call out waste where there is waste to be called out, and I will continue to figure out ways to bring also more businesses, improve our different revenue sources so that we can continue to invest in critical and core services like public safety, housing, healthcare, which all our communities in the Central Valley need.
I would like to just say that
I'm afraid we only have a limited amount of time. I'm so sorry. We're almost out of time.
And we do have one more question to get to. So the last question for both of you. Widespread bird flu has negatively affected the agriculture industry, particularly the dairy and poultry sector. And now we're seeing human infections. Just today, 13 human cases are confirmed. What more action can the state take to prevent bird flu from spreading? And do you think there's enough transparency about the situation? We'll start with Ms. Rose.
I don't have enough facts I'm not a doctor, and I don't have enough facts to answer about how to stop the spread of bird flu, but we do need to be making sure that we're tracking things and addressing things immediately. I have seen news reports about it coming in and throughout the agriculture area, so we need to just make sure we're having the tracking and the proper protocols in place to keep things from spreading, as you would in any situation where there's an attack of a flu or scenarios to the alike. I know when I was doing my internship at a dairy years ago, there was electronic tags tracking. We could track things like mad cow, and a lot of other things like that. So technological advances within agriculture will help us be sure that we can find out where these starting points are and quarantine and make sure that people are safe. And so that's things we need to continue to advocate for. in the legislature. Since I haven't used all my time, I'd also like to just point out that misrepresentations go both ways within parties, and there is some facts. People suffer mishaps, people get divorced and get cancer and lose farms, but not always is the entire truth being let out. But again, it's political season and tactics will be as they may. So I hope that the state is able to act quickly and get this bird flu situation contained and monitored and under control.
Ms. Soria.
Thank you for that question. I'm very proud to actually be the agricultural chairwoman for the State Assembly. And because of my role, I've actually taken this issue very seriously. I was actually meeting with some dairy owners yesterday, and one in particular, I was talking to Sabino, who's a veterinarian, graduate of UC Davis, lives here in the Valley, and runs a big operation of dairies. And so he was telling me that they're worried. But what he was also telling me is that CDFA actually has done a remarkable job in making sure that they're utilizing their lab, their testing. There are protocols of safety that these dairies have to abide by isolating the animals that are found to be sick, and also at the same time making sure that workers are protected. And so there's already measures in place. People are taking this issue very seriously. We need to study it. It's something very new, which I think why research and data collection is extremely important. I believe CDFA has been pretty transparent, and they're tracking and monitoring the issue very carefully. Obviously, we saw it first in Tulare County. It looks like now we've seen 1 or 2 cases in Merced County. So I'm also tracking this very closely, wanting to make sure that if we need to do anything legislatively or in combination with the administration, that we will act to make sure that we support both our workers that may need us, or also the farmers that are having to deal with this flu that is out there.
Thank you both. I believe we are at time, and that's all the time we have for questions today. And that wraps it up for this California Assembly District 27 Candidate Forum. The 2024 general election is Tuesday, November 5th, and you can register to vote at vote.org. Thank you to the candidates for joining us. Thank you to Fresno Land, KVPR, Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, the Merced Focus, the League of Women Voters, Fresno, and CMAC for hosting this event. I'm Blake Zanti from the Maddie Institute, and thank you for watching. Thank you to both candidates.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.